My sister called me at 6 in the morning on a Saturday in March. I had not spoken to her in 4 years. I had not spoken to my parents in 5. I had been sitting on the small back porch of my house in St. Paul drinking coffee when the phone rang. I had looked at the screen. I had let it ring 4 times. I had answered on the 5th ring. She had been crying. She had said, "Wilfina, the kidney is failing. I need another one. Mom and Dad asked me to call you. We need to talk." I had been quiet for about 5 seconds. I had been 30 years old. I had been a pediatric nephrology nurse at a small children's hospital in Minneapolis for the previous 8 years. I had been one of the people in my professional world who knew, with technical precision, exactly what my sister had been asking me. I had been one of the people who knew, with the same technical precision, exactly what my sister had been about to be told. I had said, "Joran, I cannot give you another kidney. I do not have one to give. I gave you one when I was 16. People only have 2. The one I have left is the one I need to live with for the rest of my life. You know this. Mom and Dad know this. The doctors who would be evaluating you for a second transplant know this. I do not know why anybody is asking you to call me." She had been quiet. She had then said, in a voice that had been smaller than the voice she had started the call with, "They thought maybe you would have ideas, or know somebody, or be able to help us figure out what to do." I had told her I would think about it. I had told her I would call her back later in the day. I had hung up. I want to tell you what I had been thinking about for the rest of that Saturday morning, and what I had said when I had finally called her back at 3 in the afternoon, and what my mother had done when my sister had relayed my words to her later that evening. I want to tell you because there are people listening to this who have been the donor in their family for years, in one form or another, and who have been waiting for the moment when the family would come back asking for more, and who have not yet figured out what they were going to say. I want to tell you what I figured out. Before I do, hit subscribe, and tell me one thing in the comments. Tell me about a time your family asked you to give something that was costly to you, and then thank the recipient of the gift instead of thanking you. Tell me how old you were. I read every comment. Now let me back up to the year I was 15, because those years when the kidney conversations had started. My name is Wilhelmina Strindberg. I am 30 years old. I am a pediatric nephrology nurse at a small children's hospital in Minneapolis. I have been doing this work for the previous 8 years. My job involves caring for small children with kidney disease, including children who are waiting for transplants, children who are receiving transplants, and children who are managing the lifelong process of living with one functioning kidney instead of 2. The work has not been a coincidence. The work had been the career I had chosen, at 21, after the year I had spent recovering from giving my kidney to my sister. The work had been my way of taking the most painful event in life and turning it into a small daily form of service to other people. The work had been useful for what I am about to tell you. The work had also been the reason I had been particularly clear on the Saturday morning my sister had called about exactly what was being asked of me and exactly what was not possible. My sister Joran is 2 years older than me. She is 32. She had been diagnosed at 13 with a rare autoimmune kidney disease called focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. The disease had progressed quickly. By the time she had been 15, her kidneys had been failing. By the time she had been 17 and I had been 15, her doctors had told my parents that she needed a transplant or she would die within a year. I want to tell you what my parents had done with that information, because the doing had been the engine of everything that happened next. My parents had told me, when I had been 15, that I was going to be tested as a potential donor for my sister. They had not asked me. They had told me. My mother had said, in the careful voice she'd been using since my whole life, when she had been about to require something of me without consulting me, "Wilhelmina, the doctors say Joran needs a kidney. You and she are the closest match in the family. We are going to take you in next week for the testing. The testing is just blood work. It is not a big deal. We need you to do this for your sister." I had said okay. I had been 15. I had not known what I had been agreeing to. I had assumed, the way 15-year-olds assume things, that the testing had been just the testing, and that the actual decisions would come later, and that the actual decisions would involve me being asked. I had been tested. The testing had shown that I had been a strong match. The doctors had told my parents that I had been a viable donor. My parents had then told me that I was going to be the donor. They had told me this at the dinner table, on a Wednesday evening in October of my sophomore year of high school. My father had said, in the voice he had been using on me my whole life when he had been about to inform me of a decision the family had made, "Wilhelmina, we are scheduling the surgery for January. The doctors say you and Joran will both need to be in good health going into it. We need you to start eating better. We need you to not get sick over the holidays. "We need you to be ready." I had said, "What if I do not want to do it?" My mother had looked at my father. My father had looked at me. He had said, in a voice that had been the smallest version of his voice that he had ever used on me, "Wilhelmina, your sister is going to die without this surgery. You are her only good match in our family. We have not raised you to be the kind of daughter who would let her sister die. Please do not say things you do not mean." I had not been able to respond. I had been 15 years old. I had been at our small kitchen table. My sister had been sitting across from me. My sister had been 17. My sister had been the favored child in our family for my entire life. My sister had not been able to look at me during the conversation. My sister had been looking at her plate. I had said okay. I had said it the way 15-year-olds say okay to things they have not been allowed to say no to. I had finished my dinner. I had gone upstairs to my bedroom. I had cried for an hour. I had not told anybody I had been crying. The surgery had been scheduled for the second week of January. The surgery had been at the regional medical center about 40 minutes from our house. The surgery had been performed by a team of surgeons who had been experienced with living donor kidney transplants. The surgery had been, by all medical accounts, successful. I had spent 6 days in the hospital. I had been in significant pain for the first 3 days. I had been on opioid pain medication for the following 2 weeks. I had been unable to lift anything heavier than 5 pounds for the first 3 months. I had missed almost a full semester of high school. I had been physically and emotionally drained for almost a year. The recovery had been harder than my parents had been telling me it would be. The recovery had been harder than the doctors had been telling me it would be, although the doctors had been honest about the range of possibilities. The recovery had been the kind of recovery that 15-year-olds are not particularly equipped to handle, in part because 15-year-olds do not yet have the framework to understand what their bodies are doing or to advocate for themselves in medical settings. My sister had been recovering at the same time. My sister had been at the same regional medical center for 10 days. My sister had then been sent home with her new kidney, which had been functioning well from the beginning. My sister had recovered faster than I had. My sister had been back at high school within 3 weeks. My sister had been back to her regular activities within 3 months. I want to tell you what had happened in our family during the months after the surgery, because the happening had been the foundation of everything that had organized the rest of my life. My parents had thrown a small party for my sister at our house in May of that year, 4 months after the surgery. The party had been to celebrate her recovery. My parents had invited about 30 people. My mother had made a small speech at the party. My mother had thanked everybody for their support. My mother had thanked the doctors and the hospital staff. My mother had thanked God for sparing her daughter. My mother had thanked Cecilia for being brave throughout the ordeal. My mother had not mentioned me. I want you to understand this. My mother had not mentioned me in the speech at all. I had been at the party. I had been standing in the small living room of our house. I had been wearing the small blue dress my mother had bought me for the occasion. I had been the donor of the kidney that had saved my sister's life. I had not been mentioned. After the speech, my father had stood up. My father had also given a small speech. My father had thanked the doctors and the hospital staff. My father had thanked the family members and friends who had been supportive throughout my sister's illness. My father had thanked my sister for being a fighter. My father had also not mentioned me. The guests at the party had been mostly extended family and friends of my parents. The guests had been smiling and nodding throughout the 2 speeches. None of the guests had pointed out the omission. A few of them had glanced at me during the speeches. A few of them had looked away when I had glanced back at them. The not mentioning had been the small, specific social moment that had clarified, for me at 15.5 years old, what kind of family I had been living in. My grandmother Astrid, my mother's mother, had been at the party. My grandmother had been 72 at the time. My grandmother had been the only person who had walked over to me during the small reception that had followed the speeches and had taken my hand. She had said, in the small, careful voice she had been using on me since I had been small, "Wilhelmina, I want you to know that I have not forgotten. I want you to know that I have noticed. I want you to know that what you did matters, regardless of whether anybody else acknowledges it. I want you to know that I am proud of you." I had cried at the small reception. My grandmother had held my hand. We had stood together at the edge of the room while my sister had been receiving congratulations from the guests. My grandmother had not let go of my hand for almost half an hour. I want to tell you about my grandmother, because my grandmother had been the only adult in my family who had ever acknowledged what I had given. My grandmother had been the woman who had eventually been the foundation of how I had been able to build the rest of my life. My grandmother had died in 2015, when I had been 21 and a half. My grandmother had left me, in her small will, a small specific bequest of $46,000 and a letter she had written to me 3 years before her death. The letter had explained that the money had been intended specifically to help me with my nursing education, which she had known I had been planning to pursue. The letter had also told me, in plain language, that she had been ashamed of my parents for what they had done to me at 15, and that she had been sorry she had not intervened more forcefully at the time, and that she had been hoping I would build the kind of life that would not require my parents' approval. I had used the money to pay for my last 2 years of nursing school. I had graduated in 2017. I had taken my first nursing position at the Children's Hospital in Minneapolis later that year. I had been working there ever since. My relationship with my parents had deteriorated gradually throughout my 20s. The deterioration had not been the result of any single confrontation. The deterioration had been the slow accumulation of small daily moments in which my parents had continued to organize the family around my sister, while treating me as a kind of supporting character who had been useful in a particular medical capacity at 15 and who had then been expected to fade back into the role of unfavored daughter for the rest of my life. I had stopped going to family events around the time I had been 25. I had stopped calling my parents around the time I had been 27. The estrangement had been gradual. The estrangement had not been declared. The estrangement had simply settled into being the way our family had been operating by the time I had been 28. My sister and I had also drifted apart. My sister had moved to Chicago after college. My sister had married a man named Adrian in 2018. My sister had a small, successful career in marketing. My sister had been, by all visible measures, recovered from her transplant and living a normal life with her transplanted kidney. My sister and I had exchanged Christmas cards. My sister and I had not talked on the phone in years. My sister had not visited me in St. Paul. I had not visited her in Chicago. The kidney my sister had received from me had functioned well for 14 years. The functioning had been within the range of what the doctors had told us to expect. Living donor kidneys typically last between 15 and 20 years. Some last longer. Some fail earlier. My sister's transplanted kidney had been on the earlier end of the failure curve, which had not been particularly unusual for somebody who had been diagnosed with focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, because the original disease had been known to recur in transplanted kidneys in approximately 30% of cases. I had been aware, in the small professional way I was aware of these statistics, that my sister's kidney was likely to begin failing at some point in her 30s. I had been monitoring the situation from a distance through occasional updates from cousins on my mother's side, who had been still in touch with both me and my parents. I had been aware that my sister had been having some symptoms of over the previous year. I had been aware more recently that she had been told her kidney function had declined to a point that would soon require dialysis or a new transplant. I had not been planning to do anything about any of this. The kidney had been my sister's kidney for 14 years. The kidney had served its purpose. The failing of the kidney was not, in any meaningful sense, my responsibility. The next transplant, if there was going to be a next transplant, would need to come from a different donor. The call on the Saturday morning had been the moment my parents had finally decided, after 13 years of distance from me, to reach out. I want to tell you what I had been thinking about during the morning hours after the call, because the thinking had been the clarifying work I had been doing for 13 years without realizing I had been doing it. I had been thinking about the medical reality. The medical reality had been simple. Living donors only have one kidney to give. I had given mine. I could not give another. The doctors evaluating my sister for a second transplant would not even consider me as a potential donor, because the consideration would have been medically irresponsible. My parents knew this. My sister knew this. The question my sister had been asking on the Saturday morning had not been a medical question. I had been thinking about what the actual question had been. The actual question, I had eventually understood by about 11 in the morning, had been an emotional question. My parents had been wanting me to re-engage with the family. My parents had been wanting me to reposition myself as the donor daughter, the supportive sister, the family member, who was willing to set aside her own life to be available for whatever was needed. My parents had been wanting me to come to Chicago, to sit with my sister at her doctor appointments, to be a presence during the long evaluation process for the second transplant, to help my parents navigate the emotional difficulty of what was happening to their favored child, to provide, in the small daily way I had been providing it at 15, the support that they had been used to receiving from me without acknowledging it. The question on the Saturday morning had been whether I was going to be the donor daughter again. The form of the donation had been different this time. The donation this time had not been an organ. The donation, this time, had been my time, my emotional energy, my professional knowledge, my presence in their lives, after 13 years of being treated as somebody who had not been worth maintaining a relationship with. I had been thinking about it for several hours. I had been thinking about it carefully. I had been talking on the phone with my partner, Sigrun, who was an emergency room nurse, and who had known me for 11 years, and who had known the whole history of my family. Sigrun had been listening. Sigrun had asked me what I had wanted to say to my sister. I had told her I had wanted to be honest. I had told her I had wanted to be honest in a way that I had never been allowed to be honest with my family when I had been 15. I had told her I had wanted to say the actual words. Sigrun had told me I should call my sister back. Sigrun had told me to say what I needed to say. Sigrun had told me I had been preparing for the call in one form or another for 15 years. I had called my sister back at 3 in the afternoon. My sister had answered immediately. I had said in the small, clear voice I had been preparing all morning, Joran, I have been thinking about what you asked me this morning. I want to tell you what I have been thinking. I am going to say a few things. I am going to ask you to listen all the way through before you respond. She had said, okay. I had said, the first thing is the medical reality. I cannot give you a kidney. I gave you mine at 16. I have one left. The one I have left is the one I need to keep. Any doctor evaluating you for a transplant will tell you the same thing. I am not your potential donor for the second transplant. I will not be considered. The asking of me on the phone this morning was not actually a medical question. We both know this. Mom and Dad know it too. I want us to be clear about that before we go any further. She had said okay again. Her voice had been smaller than before. I had said, the second thing is what the actual question is. The actual question is whether I am going to step back into the role I was in when I was 15. The role of being the supportive sister, the donor daughter, the family member who is available for whatever the family needs from her. I have been thinking about this question all morning. I want you to know what I have been thinking. I am not going to step back into that role. I am not going to come to Chicago. I am not going to be present at your doctor appointments. I am not going to be involved in the evaluation process for your second transplant. I am not going to be available to Mom and Dad to help them through the difficulty of what is happening to you. I am sorry that what is happening to you is what is happening to you. I am sorry the kidney is failing. I am sorry you are about to go through a difficult medical period. I am not going to be the person who is with you through it. I have not been the person who is with you for 13 years. I am not going to start being that person now because the family needs something from me. She had been quiet for a long moment. She had then said, Wilhelmina, please. I had said, Joran, I am going to tell you something I have wanted to tell you for 15 years. The day after the party in May, the party where Mom thanked everybody except me. I had been waiting for you to say something to me. I had been waiting for you to come into my bedroom and to tell me that you knew what I had done for you. I had been waiting for you to acknowledge in any small way that the kidney inside your body had come from me. You never did. You never said anything. You went back to high school. You went back to your friends. You went back to being the favored daughter. You let the family treat me the way the family had been treating me for 15 years. The treatment had not been your fault. The not saying anything had been your fault. You had a chance at 17 to be a different kind of sister than you had been raised to be. You did not take it. I have been waiting for 13 years now for you to take it. You have not. You are not going to. I have been understanding this slowly. I have been understanding it more clearly today than I have ever understood it. I am not going to be the sister you have been calling on the morning your kidney started failing. I am not going to be the daughter Mom and Dad have been hoping I would become again. I am sorry. I have given everything to this family that I am willing to give. I gave it when I was 16. The giving was the giving. The giving did not entitle the family to keep asking. The family has kept asking anyway. The asking ends today. She had been crying quietly on the other end of the phone. I had not been crying. I had been calm. She had finally said, wait, what am I supposed to do? I had told her she should ask Adrian. I had told her she should ask Mom and Dad. I had told her she should ask the small group of friends she had been building in Chicago. I had told her she should put herself on the deceased donor list. I had told her she should explore the possibility of paired donation programs in which she could be paired with another patient whose donor was not a match for them, but who was a match for her. I had told her there were options. I had told her the options were not me. I had told her she would figure it out. I had told her she had Adrian and Mom and Dad and her own life, and that her own life would have to be the foundation of what came next, not me. She'd been crying harder by that point. I had told her I was sorry. I had told her I had been wanting to tell her these things for a long time. I had told her I was glad we had finally been able to talk. I had told her I would think about her. I had told her I hoped the next transplant went well. I had told her I was going to hang up now and that I would not be calling back. I had hung up. I want to tell you what happened in the following weeks, because the weeks had been the small confirmation of what I had been telling my sister. My mother had called me 3 hours after my call with my sister. I had not answered. My mother had left a small voicemail. The voicemail had been 4 minutes long. The voicemail had been the small, angry summary of what my mother had been thinking for 13 years and had finally had a reason to express. My mother had told me I was selfish. My mother had told me I had abandoned my family. My mother had told me I would regret the conversation with my sister for the rest of my life. My mother had told me she had not raised me to be the kind of daughter I had become. I had listened to the voicemail once. I had deleted it. I had not called my mother back. My father had not called. My father had sent me a small email 3 days later. The email had been 1 paragraph long. The email had said, in plain language, that my father had been sorry, that he had been thinking about the situation for the previous 3 days, that he had been understanding things he had not been able to understand for 15 years, and that he had been wanting to apologize to me. The email had also said that my father did not expect me to forgive him, but that he had been wanting to say the words, and that he had been hoping I would receive them. I had not replied to my father's email. I had not been ready. I had kept the email. I have not deleted it. My sister had not called again. My sister had been preparing for her second transplant. My sister had been on the deceased donor list. My sister had been, according to one of the cousins who had been still in touch with both of us, exploring the paired donation program I had mentioned on the call. My sister had been receiving dialysis 3 times a week while she had been waiting. My sister had received a kidney from a paired donation match 9 months after the call. The transplant had been successful. My sister had been recovering well. I had heard about it through the same cousin. I had been glad. I had also not been involved. I want to tell you what I have learned, because the learning has been the foundation of everything I have been thinking about for the past year. The first thing I have learned is that the families who have asked you to give something costly to them, and who have then thanked the recipient of the gift instead of thanking you, have been telling you something specific about themselves that you should pay attention to. They have been telling you that they consider the giving to be the natural function of your role in the family, and that the giving therefore does not require acknowledgement. The acknowledgement is reserved for the receiving. The receiving is the event. The giving is just the small administrative work that supports the receiving. If you have been positioned this way in your family, please understand that the positioning is the structure. The structure is not going to change because you finally do something dramatic enough to deserve a thank you. The structure is the way the family functions. The structure will continue to function this way for as long as you continue to participate in it. The only way to change the structure is to stop participating. The stopping of participation is not abandonment. The stopping of participation is the small clarifying act that lets you finally see, from the outside, what the structure had been the whole time. The seeing from the outside is the gift. The seeing from the outside is what allows you, eventually, to build a different life that is not organized around being the unacknowledged giver in a family that has been treating you as a function rather than as a person. The second thing I have learned is that the most important thing you can give a family member who has been receiving from you for years, when they come back asking for more, is the truth. The truth is not always what the family member wants to hear. The truth is often the opposite of what the family wants to hear. The truth is sometimes the small, specific words that nobody in the family has ever said out loud. The truth is what I had said to my sister on the Saturday afternoon. The truth had been the small accumulation of 15 years of observations that I had never been allowed to put into words at the family events where the speeches had been happening. The truth had been the words. The words had been waiting for me for 15 years. The words had finally come out on a Saturday afternoon, on the phone, with my sister crying on the other end. The truth had not healed anything. The truth had clarified everything. The clarifying was what mattered. If you have a family member who has been receiving from you for years and who is about to come back asking for more, please consider that the most loving thing you can give them is not more of what they have been receiving. The most loving thing is the truth about what the receiving has been costing you and about why you are not going to keep providing it. The truth is the small specific gift that lets the family member finally understand, for the first time in their life, who you have actually been to them. The understanding may not be welcome. The understanding may be devastating. The understanding is, however, the only thing that can begin a real relationship between the two of you, if a real relationship is ever going to be possible. Without the truth, the relationship will continue to be what it has always been, which is one person seeking and one person giving, with the giver becoming progressively more depleted over time. With the truth, the relationship can become something else, or it can end. Either outcome is better than the continuation of the depletion. The third thing I have learned, and the last one I want to give to you, is that the grandparent who acknowledged what you gave, when nobody else in the family would, is sometimes the only adult in your childhood who actually saw you. My grandmother Astrid had been the only adult in my family who had walked over to me at the small party in May and had taken my hand. My grandmother had said, in plain language, that she had noticed what I had done. My grandmother had said she was proud of me. My grandmother had held my hand for half an hour at the edge of the room while the rest of the family had been congratulating my sister. The holding of the hand had been the small specific act that had let me, at 15 and a half, know that I had been seen by at least one person in the world. The being seen by one person had been enough. The being seen by one person had been the foundation that had eventually allowed me to build a life that had not required my parents' approval. The being seen by one person had been the small material protection that my grandmother had given me without realizing the size of what she had been giving me. If you have a grandmother or grandfather or aunt or uncle or older mentor who once acknowledged what you gave when nobody else in your family would, please consider that the acknowledgement may have been more important than you realized at the time. The acknowledgement may have been the foundation of everything that followed. Please thank them, in plain language, while they are still alive. The thanking is the small specific work you can do for them in return for the small specific work they did for you. The thanking will not match the size of what they gave you. The thanking is, however, the only currency available. Please use it. The using of it is the inheritance that flows in the other direction, from you back to them, in acknowledgement of the foundation they gave you that nobody else in the family ever gave you. The acknowledgement is the small specific act that lets them know, before they die, that the holding of your hand at the edge of a room when you were 15 and a half was the most important thing anybody in your family ever did for you. The most important things are sometimes the smallest. The smallest things are the things that hold you together for the rest of your life. The holding together is the inheritance. The inheritance is real. The inheritance is what you carry forward into every difficult conversation you will ever have with the family members who never bothered to hold your hand. Carry it forward. The carrying is the work. I want to ask you something before you go. Tell me in the comments about the one adult in your childhood who acknowledged what you gave when nobody else in your family would. Tell me what they said. Tell me how old you were. Tell me what they made possible for you in the years that followed. There are more of us than the families who refuse to acknowledge us would ever guess. We have been carrying the small acknowledgments forward for years. The acknowledgments are the foundation of every honest conversation we have ever had since. Tell me yours. I will be reading every single comment. I will see you in the next one.